Hello and welcome to Rogue Reviews episode 9. Today we're looking at something a bit original. Today we're creating our own planet. This game is something new because the idea is it is not a traditional board game. It's not even a traditional card game, although cards do play a role in creating the game. The whole point is you are sculpting this, your own personal planet. Each turn you take tiles and choose them to present the best possible version of your own planet that you can do. Depending upon the actual space inside or on the outside edge, you will basically score different resources which help you collect these, the different scoring animals. You will also be given your own particular resource to try to collect. For example, deserts, forests, glaciers, oceans, or mountains. Now these are kind of secret victory conditions. You will have to basically collect a certain amount of triangles worth of your terrain in order to score bonus points at the end of the game. For example, in order to score 6 points for mountains, you need to amass a mighty 17 triangles worth of land. However, water, you would need 24 to score the same. This is because water is basically more ubiquitous, more available than mountains. So depending upon which different resource you're given at the start of the game, it's easier or harder to score bonus points. As well as that, you are trying to create your own map to score different animals each turn and try to collect as many as you can. So let's have a look in more detail at the game. So how do you actually play Planet? Well, each turn, whoever has the starting player marker chooses the next stack of pentagons available. So, as you can see, there's different variety of terrain on each one. So you would choose one of these to add to your planet. These are beautifully magnetic, so it all clicks together most delightfully. And then you'd pass the remaining tokens on to the other players. Now, what influences your decision is obviously which particular resource terrain that you are trying to achieve in general. You'd always try to achieve more of these than anything else, just in case. And also which animals are available. Now, the scoring mechanism is quite simple, really. For example, whoever has the largest desert on their planet that is touching a mountain will score this card. Whoever has the greatest number of mountains in general will score this card. Whoever has the largest forest that is not touching an ocean will score this card. So it's usually biggest or most that is or isn't touching a certain type of terrain. And obviously that changes every single turn. Now the way you start it out is basically have a certain amount of piles of pentagons that will take you the first sort of 10, 11 turns. Then what happens is because the game plays up to 4 people, you'll usually be discarding one each turn from the 5 that are available. The one that's discarded goes to the end and starts building up the remaining piles. So you will see some of these tokens again, which is quite a nifty way of doing it rather than having spare tiles left over. Also, depending on which variant of the game that you play, because there are different options depending on what you would prefer to play as. What we do is follow the version where the first tile, first available animals token, is played openly. Then when you go into later rounds, there's some ones that are hidden, and finally there's some more ones that are open. So altogether there's a nice mixture of goals that you can see that you're aiming towards and goals that you don't know what they're going to be. Now, the idea is whatever resource you're trying to collect, you will normally end up with more of these on your planet. So any animals that match this that you collect will score 1 point each at the end of the game. Any animals that don't match your terrain type will score 2 points each. Presumably because for you it's harder because you would normally be trying to concentrate on this. So this gives you 2 clear strategy paths. Do you just go for whatever animals that you basically want, depending on what tiles turn up, or do you prioritise your own type of terrain? Now, in the games that we've played so far, we find that these, if they can be achieved, do give you a quite significant boost at the end of the game, but that will kind of dominate the way that you play. Also, the more of these you get, it kind of devalues the ones that actually match your own tokens, so you might actually want to play against this type and purely just look at what's on the board. For example, when you look out here, there's rather a lot of desert creatures and there's rather a lot of forest creatures, so you might wish to prioritise that. However, you do need to think ahead because, as you can see, you need, if you want to collect this, a large forest that is connected to ice, but also a large forest that isn't connected to water, and that isn't connected to desert, and that is connected to mountains. So this might give you sort of conflicting messages on what you're trying to collect. Let's mention a few turns in. So on this turn, we are, for example, collecting deserts. So we want to be aware of that at all times. So looking at this first hand, well, okay, the green tiles that we want, and there's some deserts. So let's collect this one, and this clicks in beautifully into our planet. On the next turn, let's say we have similar choices again. Now, let's imagine that we want to be collecting this token in a few turns' time. So this needs a large ocean that is connected to a forest. So why don't we go for this one? In terms of where we place it then, we want obviously to try and join the forest together, because this now counts as one big forest. If I'd placed this over here, this would count as two separate forests. Now obviously as the game goes on, if you were lucky enough to basically try to connect them, it could be possible to theoretically join these two together. So, oh look, in the end, they did actually make one big forest going all the way around. So sooner or later, you can basically kind of unify the strategy areas that you've got. Of course, this means that it's harder to get areas that, of course, are not connected to any specific thing that you want it not to be connected to. Ultimately, you will end up with all your faces covered, and you will end up with a nice mixture of different resources by the end of the game. Hopefully, you will have scored quite a few of these animals along the way, and hopefully you have built up a certain amount of your own particularly precious resource. It's worth bearing in mind in this case that this person's not done too well at connecting deserts, because they only have a desert of one, a desert of one, a desert of one. They have two mountains of two each, and they have one massive forest of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They also have an ocean of 2 and an ocean of 1. Now, the first 2 rounds that you play just have the tiles available to start building up your terrain. You only start scoring animals on the 3rd turn, at which point you have 3 turns to score animals. Now, the animals are scored after you've resolved the tiles. So it's very much a basically keep things going until the last moment. From the next turn onwards after that, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 turns where there are 2 tokens available to be collected. We play the version where obviously 1 is open and 1 is hidden. Then the final 3 turns, there are 3 animals to be collected. This gets even more interesting when there is a tie, because when there is a tie, on let's say for example, there were 2 different players who both had a big desert of exactly the same number of triangles that wasn't connected to a glacier, you can't score this turn. So you basically take this card and you add it to the end of the queue. So you find that basically at the end of the game, there will be lots more bonus tokens to be resolved and lots more bonus animals to be collected, at which point the setup of your planet may have changed. Bearing in mind the more and more and more cards keep getting added to the end, you also might want to change your strategy. For example, if you can see that there's 3 or 4 forest tiles towards the end, but you're collecting desert, you might want to shift your focus away from collecting desert to collecting forest, because if these do not match your tile, obviously they're worth 2 points each, which means it's more valuable to you to collect 4 of 8 points, rather than basically collecting a lot of deserts and maybe picking up 1 or 2 of the desert tokens. But again, this is down for you to play. So, there's not too much going on here. It is a relatively simple strategy game, but it's still visually very, very appealing. In terms of kinesthetic appeal, just touching and holding these and playing them throughout the game is absolutely fascinating. It's a very sort of comforting feel. They're nice and big and chunky enough, so it's satisfying to hold. And in terms of the magnetic pieces that click on rather nicely, they're fun to play with, it's fun to hold, and of course you've got this in your hand the whole way through the game. So there's lots of chances to play it, to think, to strategize, to turn over. You do need to be able to think 3-dimensionally, you do need to have a decent amount of spatial reasoning, but maybe this will give you something to play that you haven't actually got in your collection already, a new approach to gaming. And for that reason, it's something a little bit original. It's certainly very, very appealing to people who prefer this whole visual kinesthetic style compared to just pure mental strategy. So maybe that recommends it as a game for you. In terms of those players who like deep strategy, I think you're going to find this a very, very light game by comparison to the things that you might usually play. However, it is a very enjoyable game and therefore worth a shot for something lighter, especially if you're going to be playing a big game for the majority of your evening that's going to be quite taxing. This could be a good thing to open with. So, bearing all that in mind, let's go back and consider a few final thoughts. So then, Planet. Could it be a good addition to your gaming table? Well, let's have a think in terms of pros and cons. Visually, this is a beautiful game. In terms of the actual visual appeal, this is one of the reasons why my wife said it was a game that she really, really enjoyed, because the pieces themselves are lovely to look at, there's great artwork on the cards, and in terms of actually physically holding and manipulating these, it is a joy. They're lovely and big and chunky. I've got massive hands, but they fit into my hands really, really well. And in terms of the amount of time that you'll spend playing with this during the actual game, it is a great fascinator. The cards are smooth and glossy. The actual detail is really, really fantastically done. The magnets are very, very good quality. And in terms of the actual piece, this is a joy to have and hold. Another really good advantage is that for the most part, you are playing your own game. There's no massive real player versus player actions in this game. So for those people for whom that's a consideration, rest assured, this game will not cause massive arguments. In terms of the revolving player space, every person gets a chance to be first, to have first pick, and there's no really bad choices in terms of what pieces you collect. You will need to use quite a lot of spatial reasoning for this and spatial awareness in terms of what fits in with what, thinking three-dimensionally, and in terms of things looping around and meeting each other. This is not a game with an ocean of strategy, okay? In terms of the best choice is it's really how big a thing can I make, what's it touching, that's essentially it. And do I collect the thing that's based on the cards, or do I collect the based on my own particularly bonus terrain or not? So in terms of the choices you need to make, there's not a massive depth here, but what is there is enough to keep the game enjoyable. Now, if you're a player who prefers deeper strategy, for example, multiple victory conditions, tracing mechanics, player versus player action, all the rest of it, this game will feel probably quite light. And it is a light game. It's basically designed to be easy to pick up, very, very good for family gaming, very, very good for beginner gaming. There's very few barriers to be able to enjoy this in terms of around a table. So for some players, that is a massive, massive win, especially if they're trying to introduce a new game into a family, or for example, get more people into the hobby. So this could be seen as a real strength. In terms of the colours, in terms of the practicals, in terms of the visuals, there is so little in terms of what's going to be a problem getting this to your table. If people don't want to refer to things like deserts, and oceans and mountains, turning into yellow, blue, green, black, and white will be very, very simple. It's a very, very light themed game. For those of you who enjoy the idea of secret mechanics, secret victory goals and working towards, and there's an element of choice there, that's fine. You can have a certain amount of bluffing involved, which can be enjoyable. But if you want to just play this game straight in your own game, you can do that as well. So advantages, visual appeal, definitely. Kinesthetic appeal, definitely. In terms of accessibility for beginners, yes, real strength there. Weaknesses, if you can really call them weakness, it's a light strategy game. It doesn't have multiple victory conditions really, so if that's more the thing that you'll look for in a game, you might want to look for example, 5 tribes, 7 wonders, games more like that. So overall, I would say this is a great game to play. If in terms of a straight out buy, if you're buying this for a family who will basically enjoy beginner level gaming, then yeah, it's a very, very good choice. If you know that your friends are gamers and they have a lot of games in their collection, maybe have a little bit of a think depending upon whether this could be a bit light for them, but still they will probably enjoy it rather well. So, thank you for joining us today. If you want to contact us, as ever, you can reach us at rogueartistcreations.com. On Facebook, you can find us at Rogue Artist Creations. Our Twitter handle is at RogueACreations. And if you want to reach me, I am GMFirst at rogueartistcreations.com. I hope you've really been enjoying these videos. Please subscribe, please share the videos, please like us on Facebook, follow us, pass the details around. We're trying to generate an audience. We know we're very small at the moment, but we'd love to have you on board. So next time, we have the finale of what I'm thinking of as Season 1, and it is of course one of my favourite games, Lords of Waterdeep.